Okay, this video is going to be how to rebuild a set of Marzzochi forks off of a 2015 Beta 300RR Race Edition. Um, I've not did these forks before, but I should be able to do them without too many issues. These forks are pretty special. They've got a preload adjuster here on the top. That's what the silver three-pronged deal is there. And I've marked it so I know how many turns out it is. That adjusts a preload spring and also has some effect on the compression damping. And then the brass screw in the middle, that's the actual compression clicker adjustment. I think there's 26 clicks of adjustment on that. And then the Phillips screw that you see there is to bleed off any air that builds up inside the compression chamber. In order to get the top cap off of this fork, you're going to have a 8-sided wrench. Motion Pro makes it. I think it's 49 millimeter. And then to get the center compression cartridge out, you got to have another tool that fits inside that brass area in order to get that out. So I'm going to have to get a couple of tools for this job, but other than that, I don't think it's going to be too problematical. This fork is probably well due for a rebuild since the fork seals are leaking like sieves. Okay, we'll have a look at the bottom of the forks here. That's where the rebound adjuster is. That's what that screw is there in the middle. And to take that part off, usually it doesn't take too much. I usually hit it with an impact tool and it spins that nut loose, and then the cartridge can come out of the center of the fork. Shouldn't be a big issue to do that. I've cleaned up the forks a little bit here. They had a lot of oil all over them from the leaky fork seals. So I've already done all that part, and we'll get ready to take the top caps off and drain the oil out of the main tube bodies, and we'll see how much oil is actually in there. I have a feeling it's going to be a lot less than what's supposed to be in there. Okay, in order to take the top cap off, you need to clamp your fork tubes. I've got a set of soft jaws here in my vise. You're going to need to clamp them pretty hard. A lot of times it's easier to take that fork cap off if you leave the tube on the bike and loosen up your top triple clamp, pinch bolts, and put your wrench on there and just knock it loose before you take the tube out of the fork. The wrench is a Motion Pro piece. They're about 20 bucks, and I wouldn't try to do this job without the wrench. The top caps can be on there pretty tight, and if you try to use a channel lock or something, you're just going to booger up the cap. So this thing works real well, and on this fork I actually had to knock that wrench with the hammer you see there in order to get that cap to come loose. It was on there pretty tight. Okay, I've taken the top cap off and drained the oil into that pan you see there. I'm getting ready to take the bottom cartridge bolt loose. I'll hit that with an impact and it should just spin right out of there. So as you can see here, I've got about 200 cc's of oil that came out of this thing, and I got a little bit more down here on the pan, and I'm going to put that into the container, but I don't think it's going to amount to full 320 to 380 cc's of oil. So that's how much oil was missing from this one fork tube. It was down over 100 cc's. Now I've gone ahead and poured the oil back in here, and it's really only about 220 cc's worth. These forks have been leaking for quite some time, and also notice how black that oil is. That oil should not be black like that. Yeah, with all the oil that I've gotten out of the fork, it's really only about 220 cc's. It's really, really black. So these forks needed a rebuild really, really bad. Let's have a look at the cartridge now that I got it out of the fork tube. Um, I'm very concerned about the oil that's in the cartridge. Given the blackness of the oil that was on the outside of the cartridge, I'm concerned about, taking the oil out of here. I'm going to have to get the tool to do this because I just don't feel comfortable rebuilding these forks without going into that section and changing that oil as well. So eventually I'll get the tool and we'll take that cartridge out of this and solve that issue. So let's talk about the preload setting on these forks. There are 4 grooves. Each one is a 5mm increase in preload. All the way to the left is 0 preload, and then all the way to the right would give you 5mm for each of those groove settings. Stock setting is in the second groove from the left, which is a 5mm preload. We're going to probably move this one back to the top position, take away the preload for Jerry, and see if he likes it any better. So now I want to point out how much sludge is on the end of this cartridge. That should all be bright aluminum down there. The sludge that you see should not be there. I've did a lot of forks and I don't think I can recall seeing any that had that much sludge before. That's really, really not good. I'm going to end up cleaning all that off, but it makes me even more concerned about doing the oil inside the cartridge itself, so I will definitely get the tool to remove that compression cartridge, and we'll change out that oil as well. This bike's about 4 or 5 years old, and obviously definitely in need of a fork rebuild. So now you can see where I cleaned the sludge off of there, and you can see all the aluminum. Much better, and should make this fork work maybe a little bit better when it goes back together. Hopefully, anyway. So I've got the fork tubes separated, and I've cleaned those out nice and shiny down through there, and nice and clean. And then I've got the tube on the inner tube all nice and clean as well. And I cleaned off the spring. Let's go have a look at the bushings, and we'll see what those look like. Smaller bushing goes on the tube, and it's got some wear on the inside. You can see that. Outside, which is actually part that it runs on, actually the bushing that goes into the outer tube, and again it runs on the inside, and the inside actually doesn't look that bad, and you can see some wear on the outside, but the outside just fits against the slide. So I don't know, maybe I'll just put these back in, because that inner bushing area on that one and the outer on this one, they look pretty good, so I'll probably just reuse them. Let Jerry deal with taking the others back. So I found another use for my stretchy tape that I've been using to cover my carbon fiber repairs. This beta fork tube has a lot of holes and stuff on it, so when you slip your seals on, you don't want to catch it on any of that metal. So I've got a regular, a seal cap, but there's other holes. There's holes here, and there's ridges down through here. So I just took some of my green tape, this stuff over here, and wrapped the fork tube so I can slip the seals on. Alright, so I got the fork tube apart and got the new seals, and I reused the old bushings. They weren't that bad, so Jerry can take the other ones he bought and return them if he wants. But I've got it all staged there, ready to put it back into the tube. So, alright, bushings and seals are installed, and I put the seal savers on. I think I'm going to wait on this fork until I get the tool to take the cartridge apart. I'm really concerned that there's no oil in that cartridge, so I want to make sure before I put it back together. So this won't go back fully together until next weekend. Okay, we have the compression cartridge removed. That was pretty simple. You just got to have this Motion Pro tool, and this Motion Pro tool, and a 19mm wrench, and you put this inside of here, and this on the outside of here. Oops, like that, and you just take them apart. Oops, I got to get in video here. There we go. Then what you want to do is clean this all off. We used brake cleaner just to clean that, but to flush the cartridge out, we use kerosene. We didn't want to leave any brake fluid residue in there, and we got that nice and clean. And then on Jerry's bike, this preload adjuster, the stock position is in the second position, 5mm of preload. We moved it up to the top position so it won't have any of the preload in there. Maybe that'll soften his forks up a little bit for him. We'll see. So that's kind of where we're at. We have the other cartridge over here. Don's got it in his hand. We did the bleeding procedure, and we have the cap put on, so it's ready to go back in the fork tube. So that's all done, and we'll video putting that in, or maybe after we get it done so you can see. Okay, Ryan's going to put oil in there. We put 210 cc's into our container, and we're pouring the oil in there. The idea is to have it 140mm from the top. You can see him pinching the holes on the side of that tube. You want to do that because when you pour it in, if you don't pinch them holes off, you're going to get oil squirting out of there. And then he's going to work the cartridge rod up and down, and that'll make the oil go down into the rod. So he's putting some more oil back in, and once you get, measure it. So now he'll take our little measuring deal. It's over there, right there. And we got this set at 143mm, and so he'll go down to the top edge. Yep, and just look to see if the tip's getting wet. Is it getting wet? Yeah. All right, we got our amount of oil in there that we need, 140mm from the top, and that was exactly right around 210 cc's, so it works out. Put the last couple dibbles in there.
I don't think it's not touching like the other fork was.
So you need a little bit more?
Maybe.
Because we had it basically just getting the tip of that kind of wet. Coming up on the tip.
Yeah, that's right there on the tip.
All right. Okay, now we're going to bleed this thing. And what you do is you put the cartridge in there. And it goes down. It's going to pop in a little bit. And then what he's going to do is he's going to move the cartridge rod up and down, and we're listening for any air. If there's air in there, you're going to hear it. We probably need to put a zip tie on that to keep that up there. There we go. So if there's air inside the fluid area, you'll be able to hear the fluid moving. And what he'll do is he'll just keep kind of wiggling that thing on the top up there and letting a little bit of air out. Then he'll work the...
You'll hear it poof.
He'll work the damper rod up and down. And we're just... There, I heard a little burp.
Yep.
The idea is to get all the air out of that where the pistons are going to go in to where the fluid is. So we'll work this a bit, and then we'll let it sit for about 20-30 minutes, and then we'll put the cartridge in and screw it down and put the whole cartridge into the main fork body. Okay, so for Jerry's bike we're using Silcoline 2.5 weight, and Ryan just put 325 cc's in there. Now the book says you can go anywhere from 300 to 400. Beta book says 380. Marzzochi book says to use 320. So we're just going to put 325 in there and call it good. We put the cartridge down in there, and to torque that bottom bolt, it's kind of a pain because the cartridge wants to turn. So all we did was we used an impact, put it on number 2. I have a 3/8 driver over here, and we just whacked it. It ain't coming off.
Okay.
So there we have it, 325 cc's of oil in there. And now we'll put the fork fully together, and that'll be done with that one. We got another one to do yet. Okay, we're going to set the, I guess the top one is the compression damper clicker. And it says from the factory to set it 20 clicks from the completely closed position. So Ryan had it completely closed. He's going to count out 20 clicks.
7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 19, 20.
Okay, now go to the bottom of the fork. Just flip it over there, Don. And turn that one all the way in. And you're going to come out 20 clicks from the completely closed position on that one as well.
Ten, 15, 20.
Okay, flip it back around, Don, and we're going to do the what they call the PFP, which is a preload and compression stack adjuster. And that's that silver looking deal on the top there. So we have that all the way backed out, and it says to do 2 rotations from completely open position. So take a Sharpie there, Ryan. I had one out somewhere. And just make a mark like across from one of those so you'll know when you get 2 rotations. Okay, so now take that big 1/2-inch drive one that I had and crank that bad boy down 2 full turns.
Clockwise?
Yep.
There you go, lefty tighty. Pull it off. There you go.
So that's 1 full turn.
It's very fine thread.
Yep.
Okay. Oh, almost. Okay.
All right, so we got that 2 full turns down. That completes the adjustments on the fork for that side. So we'll do the other fork and then we'll be done.